But let's first begin here with this attempt by Senate Democrats to advance this landmark voting rights bill, which, we expected, and it did, fail yesterday on the Senate floor. Their efforts to pass a filibuster rule change was shut down by 52 votes to 48 last night. Democrats Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema joined 50 Republicans in rejecting the rule change. Earlier on CBS Morning, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, spoke with Gayle King about the next move for the White House.
Well, what we will do is we will keep fighting to get the legislation passed, because that is critical. So we are not giving up on that. And then it is a matter of continuing to do the work of executive orders, doing the work through the Department of Justice, which has been litigating these cases in the various states, because we believe that they are a violation of the spirit of the Constitution of the United States. It is going to be about continuing to elevate this conversation, because, Gail, frankly, you'd be surprised how many people in the burden of everyday life are unaware of what's happening in these states, but when they become aware of laws that make it illegal to give people food and water if they're standing in line, they're outraged.
All right, Scott MacFarlane was on the Hill while lawmakers deliberated and voted on the legislation. Here is somewhat of what he heard and what he saw.
On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 48.
President Biden's landmark voting legislation failed in the Senate late Wednesday night.
This is a moral moment in America.
After nearly 12 hours of heated debate over changing filibuster rules to get the bill through.
They would shatter the soul of the Senate for short-term power.
This is an unprecedented, coordinated attack to make voting harder for eligible citizens.
Facing a wall of unanimous Republican opposition, Democrats were dealt back-to-back losses without being able to change Senate procedures, eliminate the filibuster, and pass sweeping voting rights law. One of the holdouts, West Virginia's Joe Manchin.
Eliminating the filibuster would be the easy way out. It wasn't meant to be easy.
The proposed voting legislation would have allowed for early voting and no excuse mail-in voting nationwide, and it would have made Election Day a federal holiday. Two of the Senate's 3 black members clashed over accusations that any opposition was an attempt to deny minorities the vote.
I felt frustration and irritation rising in my souls as I keep hearing the references to Jim Crow. I ask myself how many Americans understand what Jim Crow was.
Don't lecture me about Jim Crow. I know this is not 1965. That's what makes me so outraged. It's 2022, and they're blatantly removing more polling places from the counties where Black and Latinos are overrepresented.
Members of the Congressional Black Caucus took a last-minute stand outside the Senate, but walked away knowing the voting rights law was set to fail.
And Scott is on the Hill now to recap yesterday's vote and what happens next. So, Scott, what happens next? What are you hearing from Democrats?
Vlad, they're going to have to reorganize, come up with a new plan. What happened last night was heated. You heard it. It was visceral, both supporters and opponents of the plan last night. But there was no surprise. This was a certainty weeks, if not months ago. Supporters of the voting rights law said it would make it easier to vote, make it harder to suppress at the ballot box. The opponents said this was a power grab, a change of rules by one party trying to get more power. What happens next is a big open-ended question, and one that will define this day here at the U.S. Capitol. Do they break up this proposal into smaller chunks, perhaps more popular chunks? Do they simply go to change the Electoral College Count Act, that obscure 19th century law that governs how the Congress actually counts the electoral vote after a presidential election? That was the process, of course, disrupted by the U.S. Capitol attack January 6th. Senator Joe Manchin, that pivotal senator from West Virginia, said he'd be open to that. The president made a fleeting reference to it during his press conference. Maybe that's the next train out of the station, but the tracks are a little wobbly right now, and they're definitely uncertain.
So, Scott, as you know, recently, the president came around to supporting changing the filibuster rules. He's been very hesitant to throw his weight behind it, but didn't make a difference. Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin voted against changing the rules. Can you just sort of remind people what their concerns were?
The rules are the filibuster. Democrats were facing a wall of opposition from Republicans, Anne Marie. There was no Republican support for this voting rights bill, so they would have had to pass it with Democrat votes alone. The majority doesn't rule in the Senate. They'd have to change the rules to allow a majority vote to win the day. Senators Sinema and Manchin were emphatic. They didn't support that. They had concerns that that would minimize the filibuster, be detrimental to the institution. And Senator Mitch McConnell yesterday told reporters the shoe's going to be on the other foot eventually, perhaps soon. And if you weaken the filibuster for us, it'll be weakened for you, Democrats, when you're in the minority. So there is an institutionalist argument. And Anne Marie and Vlad, Senator Manchin continually invokes the name of his predecessor, Senator Robert Byrd, the institutionalist from West Virginia, in making his argument that back home in West Virginia, they want the filibuster to stay.
So, Scott, both Senators Sinema and Manchin have said that they support the voting rights bill in theory. So what are they doing? What are you hearing from their offices about what they're doing to advance it? In other words, okay, so we know where they stand on the filibuster, but to get 10 Republicans to sign on to this, what are they doing to reach across the aisle and make that happen?
Senator Manchin has been unequivocal, Vlad. The discussions should resume. Bipartisan discussions should resume. And this is such a fluid situation because on the ground in the states at this moment, there are ongoing battles over voting rights. As Congress stalemates, there are some very fast-moving changes. Michigan, for example, there's a petition drive being led by Republicans in the state. If they get 350,000 signatures, it's expected the Republican legislature will pass into law stricter voter ID requirements. That's happening as very little is happening here. So they're open to more bipartisan discussions, but there's no indication new bipartisan discussions will occur. And it was quite striking, the timing of all this, Anne Marie and Vlad. They have a vote they know is going to lose on the eve of the anniversary of President Biden's inauguration. And Joe Manchin really laid the dagger down yesterday on the Senate floor as President Biden was giving that news conference.
Well, we talked earlier about that epic news conference, Scott, and one of the things that the president talked about is that some of his the skills that he learned as a senator, collaboration and cooperation, that he thought he could sort of apply to being the president, isn't really working out for him. And he talked about his frustration with Republicans, but then he also spoke about what Republicans have said to him privately, and I want to play some of that sound.
I've had 5 Republican senators talk to me, bump into me, quote unquote, or sit with me, who've told me that they agree with whatever I'm talking about for them to do. But Joe, if I do it, I'm going to defeat it in a primary. We got to break that. It's got to change.
So what's your take on the president's comments there?
That was profound because the president went on to say that it's such a unique moment that an ex-president, somebody out of office, still has the allegiance of his party, not just here, but in other parts of the country as well. There's a concern among Republicans and among Democrats that both parties are really driving at a pretty fast clip towards their bases, concerned about primaries. Republicans perhaps concerned that if they don't have the support of Donald Trump, they're not going to win their House or Senate primaries, which, by the way, are coming up this spring. The general election's in the fall, but the primaries are coming soon. Democrats as well, concerned about primary challenges. In fact, this week in the U.S. Senate was defined by some senators endorsing primary challenges against Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin. So we're in a particularly toxic political moment. And when we have toxic political moments, Vlad and Anne Marie, members are concerned about their own flank and outflanking other members of their own party.
Yep, so true, Scott. Thank you very much.